The year is 1945. World War II has just ended. Everyone is completely exhausted, but two new superpowers are left on the global stage, puffing themselves up at each other: the USA and the Soviet Union. They represent two completely different ways of running a planet. The USA loves capitalism, Hollywood, and free markets, while the Soviet Union runs a strict communism where the government controls everything. Both are terrified that the other's ideas will take over the world, so they start an intense global staring contest known as the Cold War. They don't dare shoot directly at each other, mostly because they both have nuclear weapons and would rather not turn the Earth into a glass parking lot. Instead, they start supporting conflicts in other countries to gain influence. This brings us to a small but incredibly important peninsula in Asia, Korea. For decades, Korea had been occupied by the Japanese Empire, but when Japan loses World War II in 1945, there is suddenly a mess to clean up, and power needs to be divided. The USA and the Soviet Union agree on a temporary and very practical solution. They simply take a map, draw a completely random line across the middle at the 38th parallel, and basically say, we will take the southern half and you take the northern half. North Korea gets a communist leader, Kim Il-sung, whose hand is held by the Soviet Union. South Korea gets a strongly right-wing leader supported by the USA named Syngman Rhee. Both leaders disagree deeply on almost everything in life. Except for one small, dangerous detail, they are both 100% convinced that they are the only rightful ruler of all of Korea. The mood is tense, to put it mildly, and the border guards literally stand there glaring angrily at each other for 5 years. But on June 25th, 1950, something happens. After a long time of begging, Kim Il-sung in the north finally gets the green light, and a lot of nice tanks from the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin. Without warning, the North Korean army crashes across the border into South Korea. The South Koreans are completely unprepared and are simply run over. In record time, the South Korean army is pushed all the way down into a tiny corner of the country in the southeast, called the Pusan Perimeter. It looks very dark for South Korea, but over in the USA, President Harry Truman is sweating. He is terribly afraid of the so-called domino theory, the idea that if one country, like South Korea, falls to communism, the rest of Asia will fall with it like dominoes. Therefore, the USA quickly goes to the UN and puts together a massive international military force to save South Korea. The UN force's top commander, the heavy-smoking and extremely confident American General Douglas MacArthur, looks at the map and thinks, why fight our way all the way up through the country from the bottom when we can sneak in through the back door? He launches an incredibly brave attack from the sea at the port city of Incheon, which is far up the coast, deep behind enemy lines. It was a nightmare to plan because of some of the most extreme tides in the world. The water simply disappeared and left kilometers of mud. But it worked. The North Koreans are caught completely by surprise, caught in a giant trap from both sides, and have to run away with their tails between their legs all the way back across the border. MacArthur and the UN troops have won. Or they should have. Because they do not stop at the original border at the 38th parallel, they get overconfident, thinking, let's just take the whole package and push the North Korean army all the way up to the Yalu River, which is the border to China. But the year before, in 1949, China had become communist under Mao Zedong. Mao looks quite nervously across his river and suddenly sees hundreds of thousands of American and South Korean soldiers, setting up camp right in his backyard. China sends several very clear warnings to the USA to back away, but General MacArthur shakes his head proudly and simply rejects the idea that China would dare to get involved. He is wrong. Completely wrong. Suddenly, in the biting cold winter at the end of 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers pour across the border under the cover of darkness. They attack with trumpets and cymbals in the middle of the night, which spreads total panic among the freezing UN troops. Now it is the USA and South Korea's turn to flee wildly to the south, all while the thermometer drops to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The war turns from a quick victory march into a brutal, freezing cold nightmare, where the front line moves back and forth across the Korean peninsula for months like a violent game of tug-of-war. After 2 years of bloody and incredibly exhausting trench warfare, both sides finally realize that neither of them is going to win a total victory. The front line has ended up frozen in place almost exactly where it all started 3 years earlier, around the 38th parallel. In July 1953, after endlessly long and frustrating negotiations, the groups finally sign a ceasefire so the shooting stops. But notice the word ceasefire. A real peace treaty is never actually signed. Instead, they create a buffer zone between the two countries, known as the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ. Ironically, today it is one of the most militarized and closely watched places on the planet, complete with millions of landmines, electric barbed wire, and soldiers standing and staring directly into each other's eyes 24 hours a day. Technically, North Korea and South Korea are still at war to this very day. The Korean War is often called the Forgotten War because in the history books it sits awkwardly squeezed between the clear hero status of World War II and the massive cultural chaos of the Vietnam War. But it really defined the modern world. It proved that the Cold War was not just talk, but could get burning hot and cost millions of human lives. It split an entire people in half and created two extreme opposites, the completely isolated and dictatorial North Korea and the technological and democratic South Korea that we know today.